Some people are accusing Gen Z of being lazy and entitled. Gen Z, they've got their opinions of boomers. Are they really harder working, or do they just love to be in the office all day? Are millennials really the snowflakes, or are they just first to realize that selling your soul for corporate success isn't really worth it?
All right, let's talk millennials. The burnout generation? I'm not sure where the burnout generation came from. Gen Z, stop crying about your student loans.
What irritates the boomers?
Oh, I think one is a millennial working. Email comes in at 9 o'clock at night. The millennial's playing a video game or something like that. Tabs over, reads the email, responds to it, and goes back to shooting, playing the shooter game or whatever, like nothing ever happened, right? Just boom, in, out. The Gen Xer would be get a message on the phone, need to check the email, go over to the computer, boot up the computer, reply to the email, then shut the computer down. The boomer's still at the office at 9 o'clock at night, still running around crazy, and just responds to the email before they leave, 3 hours later.
Can I add one more? I had a client who was in his 80s, and he's actually not a boomer. He's part of the greatest generation, right? That generation before. He would get that email, book a flight to come talk to you in person about it.
Boomers are definitely respect the hierarchy, chain of command.
Yes.
Titles matter. When your boss says jump, you say how high. And you notice that is, I wouldn't call that a lost art, but I think there's a lot of challenge of like, why should I jump? Just because why ask me to jump? Why? There's more challenge to the hierarchy these days.
I think that there's something cynical about the Gen Xers. Gen Xers, they have conflict in both directions, towards the boomers and towards the Gen Z and millennials. One of the primary conflicts is just looking down on the millennials and thinking they're soft. There's a swing away from, be the corporate man, be a good company guy, to more of a work-life balance, right? Like if you've seen your parents give 40, 50 years to a company only to be laid off because of a financial crisis, that's not a game I want to play. And so I'm going to make sure that I enjoy life rather than sell out for a company that isn't going to protect me when times get tough.
Welcome to the Make Work Not Suck podcast.
All right, Ryan, let's talk about work ethic, because I hear this a lot from different friends, different clients, that one of the biggest challenges for them right now is employing people from multiple generations at the same time. Up to 4 generations are in the workforce today. And that creates kind of this generational warfare where some people are accusing Gen Z of being lazy and entitled. Gen Z says, they've got their opinions of boomers. Are they really harder working, or do they just love to be in the office all day? Are millennials really the snowflakes, or are they just first to realize that selling your soul for corporate success isn't really worth it? So want to talk about each generation's approach to work, why they hate each other's approach, and how this makes work not suck.
I like it. So I know I've talked a lot about millennials, Gen Z, or Gen X and boomers in the past. And now I got to come up with a new phrase because I don't know. I got to incorporate Gen Z into this, because you used to say, a millennial working, email comes in at 9 o'clock at night. The millennial's playing a video game or something like that, tabs over, reads the email, responds to it, and goes back to shooting, playing the shooter game or whatever, like nothing ever happened, right? Just boom, in, out. The Gen Xer would be, get a message on the phone, need to check the email, go over to the computer, boot up the computer, reply to the email, then shut the computer down. The boomer's still at the office at 9 o'clock at night, still running around crazy, and just responds to the email before they leave, 3 hours later.
Can I add one more? I had a client who was in his 80s, and he's actually not a boomer. He's part of the greatest generation, right? That generation before. He would get that email, book a flight to come talk to you in person about it, because he was terrible at texting. Email was okay, but he wanted to do everything face to face.
Okay, so the older generation would just book a plane ticket, or just get in their car and drive to you.
Just get in his car and drive to you.
Yeah, they wouldn't send you an email at late at 9 o'clock at night. They'd drive to your house, knock on the door, and start talking.
Right.
Okay, so then where does that put Gen Z? Because my story there, I think Gen Z and millennials are much closer. I don't know. I think the Zers might just use like totally different language.
Well, Gen Z doesn't have email to begin with. Sending an email to Gen Z is not going to get through. So after 3 emails, you might call or text them and they would say, why were you sending emails? I don't
Well, I
have
guess
an
you better.
email.
I guess you better tweet them or make a
Mm-hmm.
TikTok video or something to get in front of them.
Right. And
Oh
they would
boy.
just reply with some with a string of emojis that you're probably not going to be able to decipher.
I'm guilty of that too. And I'm not Gen Z.
So what I think is interesting is that each of these generations, right, we can poke fun at them, but I think they each have a different set of values, a different set of expectations around work and life. And I think that those unspoken expectations create a lot of conflict in corporate contexts. I know a lot of the baby boomers that I have worked with really place a high value on butt and seat time, right? Being in the office, being seen at your desk, in their mind translates to, well, this person is committed, they're hardworking, they are doing what they're being paid for, and they're not entirely wrong. I wouldn't say they're entirely right, but that's kind of their viewpoint, is this value of face time, and that's kind of how they work. And I think COVID and distributed workforces and remote work and all that kind of stuff has been really challenging for them, because I think it cuts across the grain of some of the things that they really value.
All right. So we're going right into the boomers, right?
Sure, why not?
All right. So, well, they are the OG hustlers, right? Early in, laid out. They saw overtime as a badge of honor, and work was the identity. They stayed in the same job for decades because of loyalty was everything.
Maybe we need to define this, right? Baby boomers, I think, were born in probably in the mid 40s to mid 60s, right?
Let's see. We're looking at 46 to 64.
46 to 64. Okay. They're probably in their 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Gen X being the next one down, probably 1965 to 1980, give or take.
Yep. 65 to 80.
And remember, these aren't hard and fast rules, right? The kid born in December of 1980 doesn't think radically different from the kid born in January of 81, right? They're kind of general ranges, but you got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah, you might lean one or the other. You
Right.
identify, if you will, one or the other.
Sure.
But
it's more of a continuum than a hard break.
I also find it interesting that these year ranges have moved a little bit over the years, because a millennial used to be from like 1983 to like 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And now millennials are from 81 to 96.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know why 96 is a cutoff point, but I'm sure that's another episode for another time. And then Gen Z, 1997 through 2012.
I'm just going to tell you, it's got to do something with Taylor Swift, I'm sure. Because I'm sure if you're born in 97 or later, you love Taylor Swift. And if you're born in 96 or earlier, you probably just like her. You're not in love with Taylor Swift. So I think it's got to be something about the Swiftie effect.
Probably. So long tangent, kind of defining our terms, but let's go back. So baby boomers in their 60s and 70s really kind of valued work as an identity. I think they valued tenure, right? So you get promoted because you've been here for a long time, not because you're doing a good job, but just because you've been loyal to the company. So we're going to promote you. And there's good and bad about that. What irritates the boomers? What is it that drives the boomers crazy in a corporate context?
Oh, I think one is, especially if you got a boomer that's hiring a Gen Z, the job hopping.
Oh,
they cannot stand. They look at somebody, they're not loyal to a company. They can't stick to a job. And the job hopping, I think, is one of the biggest annoyances for a boomer.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of boomers get really annoyed at the expectation of progression. Like, I've been here for a year. Why haven't I gotten promoted yet?
Yeah.
And so it's almost the inverse of the tenure. I've been here for a long time, so I deserve to get promoted. It's like, I've been here for a short time. I still deserve to get promoted. I've shown up. So where's my trophy? I think one of the other things that has bothered a lot of boomers is the kind of remote work, right? If you really value FaceTime, time in the office, then people who kind of think remote first, who might sleep all day and code all night, that's hard for them. They don't see that as being as fitting into the corporate culture. Even if they're very productive, it just kind of cuts against the grain, and honestly, really upsets them.
So you're saying the back when we had the government jobs episode, you're telling me the boomers were the only ones in the government buildings working while everybody else was remote?
Yeah, probably. They were the ones looking forward to going back to the office.
This is another interesting one. Boomers definitely respect the hierarchy, chain of command.
Yes.
Titles matter. When your boss says jump, you say how high. And you notice that is, I wouldn't call that a lost art, but I think there's a lot of challenge of like, why should I jump? Just because why ask me to jump? Why? There's more challenge to the hierarchy these days, but I don't know if I'd necessarily say that's a negative thing. I just think from the boomer perspective, it's not respecting the chain of command.
I think the boomers also had more of a respect or value of the institution and the corporation, right? Being a corporate man was viewed as a good thing. Whereas I think younger generations, being a corporate man is a sellout, and they're more suspicious or skeptical of corporations. Whereas I think older generations were more willing to kind of buy in and support what the company was doing for the good of the company.
Let's move on to X.
The Cynical Survivors.
Are you a cynical survivor?
I am. If you draw the line at 1980, I am, but I'm close to a millennial. So I think I've got a little bit of the millennial in it, but probably more Gen X. Raised by boomer parents. That's me. I think many of them saw their parents kind of give everything to their corporate jobs and said, you know what, I'd rather have a different life. I'd rather have more work-life balance than just, selling myself out for 40 years just to get a gold watch at a retirement party. I think that there's something cynical about the Gen Xers. I think there is this kind of reaction to the corporate BS, kind of give the finger to the man. And I think, looking for ways to escape corporate life. And I think there's a lot of great movies, a lot of great music about, coming from the, probably the 90s and early 2000s when these people were coming of age, of just not wanting to be part of that system.
Well, Gen X was the rebels.
Yeah.
The absolute rebels. They wanted nothing to do with the system and to challenge the status quo. And
right. Our soundtrack is Rage Against the Machine and Green Day and, just kind of a give the finger to the man type music.
The Gen X was allergic to BS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
Which you can see where a Gen Xer and a boomer will not fare well, especially in a sales environment, because what were the boomers great at? They were great BSers in sales.
Right. The other interesting thing about Gen X, and I've actually seen this, they created a new category called the Xennials, which is the bridge between Gen X and Millennials. So I think they defined it as like 78 to 84 or something like that. And what they pointed out in a couple of articles that I've read is that group is a very interesting group. And I happen to be a part of it because they were part of both the analog and digital world. I remember a world without the internet. I remember getting my first email account assigned to me as a freshman in college, but I remember using phone books as a kid to look things up. And so I've got an analog life prior to the internet, and then obviously had to learn everything with the internet and came up in that. I was in college when all of that was exploding. But it's funny because boomers, I think, generally struggle with the digital because that came in later in their life. And the millennials only knew digital. Like they never had any experience in the pre-digital world. And there's that small window of people that grew up bilingual in both the digital and analog world. And I'm kind of proud of being one of them. But it does make me cynical of both the other groups, because I think that all the millennials don't know how hard life used to be. And then all the old people don't know how to adapt to technology. So I like to just kind of piss on both of them.
Hey, I'll give you a little bit of that, but it's Gen Z that's the worst because they don't have a clue what dial-up is.
Right.
And if you've suffered through the age of dial-up, then, that's a hard life.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many things now that just happen that were just so painful. Like I look at coding languages today and I'm like, oh my gosh, how easy it is to write code now versus when I was writing code, and that you've got one syntax error and you've got to go find the missing comma in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. And there's no direction. It's just compile error, start over. So if you've never suffered through that, it's really easy to look down on people and all the tools that they have to make life easier. They're great, but there's a lot of people who have spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears doing things the hard way before all the digital tools have come out that have made life so much easier and just everything so much faster now.
Again, I think you're right. There's just that level of no pain, no gain, right? Like we went through the ultimate. I mean, I guess you could say like the boomers, they had punch cards, and
sure,
it was even harder than that. But the days before the internet, when you actually had to, drive somewhere.
So I think Gen Xers, have conflict, maybe not strong conflict, but I think they have conflict in both directions, towards the boomers and towards the Gen Z and millennials. One of the primary conflicts is just looking down on the millennials and thinking they're soft. Like they're just not willing to put the grind in. And I'm not saying that's entirely fair, but when you look at what a lot of Gen Xers had to do to get to where they're at, it's easy to look down on the Gen Z employees and feel like they haven't really put in the work and they haven't earned it.
I love the line here. Gen Z, stop crying about your student loans.
Yes. I think Gen Xers also, I know for me, I really love making fun of corporate BS. I think about the movie Office Space, that was just a mockery of all the horrible things that exist in a lot of corporations. I can't recommend the movie. There's definitely some language in it, and I think a little nudity. So this isn't an endorsement, but if you've ever felt like you just want to quit your job, that movie will actually, it feels like therapy.
Well, let's be honest. Like that is like the work theme of Gen X.
Right.
That movie is the Gen X works mindset.
Yes. It's BS. It's meaningless. It's purposeless. It's unfair. And it is, it's killing, it's basically killing your soul. And the only way out is to burn the whole thing down. Right. And that's, that is the epitome of work sucks. Is it's meaningless, it's purposeless, and the only way out is to burn it all down, which is a very Gen X cynical attitude.
And don't forget the stapler.
Anything else that you've seen really causing conflict between Gen X and some of the other generations?
No, I think Gen X is a little bit of a bridge between millennial and boomer. I think there's, depending on which side you're on, I think you can identify with some boomers a little bit easily. And I think some of the later Gen Xers can relate to the millennials a little bit more. But I think I think there's still that where the bigger gap comes in is to Gen Z.
Yeah, I would say maybe the last thing I've noticed is a lot of Gen Xers just figure stuff out. Right. There wasn't a lot of, coming up in the digital age as it was evolving. There wasn't a lot of mentoring. There wasn't guidebooks. There wasn't dial up for dummies. Like we just had to figure it out. And I
Well,
think that became a skill set that we've taken, but that's not always fair to assume on other people.
well, isn't Gen X the generation that basically just like grew up outside, just roaming the streets while their parents were all working?
Yeah, the latchkey generation. Both your parents are working, so you get home from school and you're on your own for a couple hours.
So I think that whole generation, even in the workplace, is just figured out
Yeah.
survival.
And I think it's really frustrating when I've worked with people who expect to be spoon fed. That really, I'm like, dude, just figure it out. Like, put it into Google, go read Reddit, like, watch a YouTube video, like, go freaking figure it out. Don't ask me how to do it. I've got too many other things to do. But I think that's probably a function of my upbringing and a little unfair to do to people who didn't have the same experience as I did.
Yeah. All right, let's talk millennials. The burnout generation. I'm not sure where the burnout generation came from.
So here's an interesting thing. There's a friend of mine. Actually, you've worked with him as well. And when I realized what his birthday was, somebody pointed out to me. They said, "You know what? In his life, he has only known bad things. It's like 9/11 was one of his first memories, right? Then the 2008 financial crisis and the impact that had on his family." And it's just kind of one thing after the next. There wasn't a lot of wins for society, at least here in the US, right? The US society, there wasn't these hurrahs, we did it. We put a man on the moon. We, won the Cold War. Like, those things all happened before he was born or before he was aware of what was going on. And so from his perspective, like, it's just kind of one kick in the teeth after another. And I think that's what this burnout generation is talking about is if you were born in 81, you probably weren't really aware of what was going on until the 90s. And then it's like war. It's just, there aren't really any good mile markers in your life experience that say life's getting better and I'm going to make it.
Well, I mean, I'll go with I was in this age range. You had the financial crash of the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know much about it. I was still too young, but it had an impact. Then you had the first Gulf War in 92? And so
91,
then,
92?
Yep. And then, shortly after that, somewhere in there, we had O.J. Simpson.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget that.
I consumed all the TV, the airwaves. Yeah, the 2000 crash. And then, 9/11 following right after that. And then the second Gulf War. And then, it's been one tragic event after another.
Yeah. And so I think it's very easy for this generation to be disillusioned, right? I feel like the game's rigged against me. And it's not that I don't want to play. It's just that I know I can't win.
I like that. Hardworking is disillusioned.
Yeah. There's a swing away from, be the corporate man, be a good company guy, to more of a work-life balance, right? Like if you've seen your parents give 40, 50 years to a company only to be laid off because of a financial crisis, that's not a game I want to play. And so I'm going to make sure that I enjoy life rather than sell out for a company that isn't going to protect me when times get tough.
So what I find really interesting is we all know millennials are purpose driven. And what's driving a lot of purpose in business today is the drive from the millennials and reconnecting with why and whatnot. And the thing is they always said, I remember this going back several years, millennials aren't loyal at all. They'll jump from job to job. And it's actually quite the opposite. As millennials are very loyal to a cause. Now, when you look at like the boomers and millennials, boomers they weren't driven by a cause. They were driven by a result. And they were loyal to that result. As long as it kept producing that result, it really was the same thing, but it was like the opposite side of the same coin.
Yeah.
As long as the purpose was because life sucks or work sucks, life sucks. There's all these disasters as we just went through. You might as well give me something worthy of working for. And if you give me that, then I will be loyal and work hard, etc. But if you don't, then I am going to I'm disillusioned and going to hop from one thing to another. So it's interesting where the similarities are, but where the different generations weren't seeing it because one was result driven versus one were intrinsic driven versus extrinsic driven.
Right. Yeah. Loyal to an institution versus loyal to an ideal.
That's probably a good designation there. Is I think Gen X was just enough intrinsic drive and just enough extrinsic drive where it kind of bridged in between. Boomers were definitely extrinsic motivated, the second car, the second house, the money, the things, right? And I think that's also where a lot of millennials, they grew up in houses that had things. So they wanted more intrinsic drive. So it just switched.
Right. More experiences, less possessions. I've seen millennials be much less respectful of the corporate hierarchy, just not really kind of understanding that. And in some organizations, in smaller organizations, that kind of hierarchy is not, there. It's not well developed. It's not super important. But in a lot of larger companies, particularly older companies that have decades, if not 100+ years of history, hierarchy is very important. And I think that's a challenge for millennials who I think value collaboration more and tend to almost devalue tenure. And I've seen that certainly create a lot of conflict where, just because you've been in this same job for 30 years doesn't mean you're necessarily better than me. In fact, I think it might mean that you're not as good as me because you've been stuck in the same way of doing things for 30 years. And I'm young and I just got out of college and I've got a lot of great ideas. You should listen to me. And you can see how those two are going to not play well together because they have a very different perspective on the value that they create for the organization.
It's always interesting for me to look at, boomers, X and millennials. Because like you said, boomers didn't have the technology. Their careers were well established before technology came. I mean, there was levels of technology, but not to the extreme, right? And then you said Gen X, kind of came from an analog to a digital. And then millennials were the first generation to actually have technology in their hands at birth. Now, what I mean by that is like the little toy where you press one button and the red light comes on. You press another button and the green light comes on. You could push a button and things would happen and you could interact with it. That's technology. Those things didn't exist to that degree. They're mechanical versions, but not digital versions. And so I think one thing that came in is there's that, lazy or, we have a lot of great ideas. We came with technology. It's almost like, back in the day, you would have, let's say if you're a corn farmer, it was great grandfather, father, son, and how you plowed the field and how you maintained the equipment and all that was passed down. There was a form of even how you harvest the field, you used a level of technology and tools to do that, but it was always passed down from the older generation to the younger generation. And there was that social, emotional, psychological connection in that handing of experiences. And so with the millennial being, technology first, there was actually a gap there. The first time in history, the younger generation was teaching the older generation technology, and it made it very difficult because it wasn't so much that we came out of college and we just knew better than everybody else. It's we knew how to use this tool called technology better, faster, more efficient than everybody else. And we could do the same job twice as fast because we use technology as opposed to the old way. What the millennials were missing is they were missing the EQ side of the equation of handing it down, and it became very IQ focused. So it became, what is it you always say, like, don't bring facts to a feelings fight? That's basically what would happen is you would have the older generations being the feelings and the younger generation being the facts. And that's where they're talking past each other. And that's where you got, boomers just don't get it. They're dinosaurs. They're just doing it the old way. And you'd get the boomers coming back and the millennials don't understand how to build a relationship. And, they're just about their technology and they're not loyal and they don't understand how to connect with people.
Yeah. And they don't respect the history of what it took to get here.
Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting way of phrasing it. The IQ versus the EQ. I think I don't want to hold on to that one. All right. So Gen Z, this is the emerging workforce, definitely a lot younger. We're talking about people born after 1997. I think work for them is very pragmatic, right? A job is a job. It's not an identity. It's a paycheck. They, I think, are very efficient. I think they really value their personal time. And so, they'll put in the time. The good ones are hardworking, but they also recognize that there's a time to stop and go do what they would rather do, right? Go do something for their personal life.
You know what I've noticed with Gen Z, and this is mostly because maybe my kids are in this generation, and my older son is definitely in the workplace now. So I'm using him as my example here. But man, they like to complain about everything. Like
Okay,
you working at look, I get it. Working in a restaurant is not fun as your first job, but it's one of those like, suck it up, buttercup. Like everybody's got to start somewhere. And it's just like, how was your day? Oh, this customer was rude to me and it was horrible. I'm like, that's life. Welcome to it. Now, don't get me wrong. There are Gen Zs that I work with in several companies that are amazing. They're fast. They're fun. They're collaborative. The only thing that I notice is they tend to get like, and maybe this just comes with the level of experience, right? It's the lack of, it's like there's just that expectation, it's just instant gratification. I built a process, let's deploy it. It's like, yeah, but it's almost like there's a lack of journey. There's a kind of a Gen Z has a little bit of boomer in them, which I find ironic. Where they're just like, they want that result. I want it now. And now they have like the EQ side of, the personality or the collaboration, highly collaborative and work with each other and go team. But man, they want that like, well, I clicked the button in Amazon and I got it here in 2 days. Like, why can't this process be deployed in 2 days? I did this thing. Why isn't that happening? And it's like, it's almost so tunnel vision. Or millennials were very journey focused. Could see the processes and think through the journey, and Gen Z just wants to blow through the journey and get straight to the result.
Yeah, in their defense, Gen Z has grown up in a world of instant gratification. And so
totally.
They haven't had to wait for very many things. What I have found in my work with Gen Zs and with people who hire Gen Zs, it is really hard to get young people to realize that everything important in life is a function of compound interest. Good relationships, a good career, good health, good finances. None of those things are a function of intensity. They're all a function of consistency. You can't get healthy in a weekend. You can't do a 48-hour blitz and develop a great relationship, right? Like that stuff just takes time. And they've really been dealt a difficult hand because they haven't had a lot of those experiences where they had to do something for a long time before they saw the results. They're used to getting to results very quickly. And I think that's part of the challenge of engaging Gen Z employees is they're there for 3 weeks and they're like, I expected to change the world by now. I haven't changed the world. Maybe this isn't the right place for me. I'm going to go look at a different job. And it's like, dude, you've been here for 3 weeks. Like, chill out.
That's like job ADD.
Right.
Holy crap.
But if you're used to seeing results that quickly, you're going to think something's wrong because you haven't changed the world in 3 weeks. And I think that obviously creates a lot of conflict with some of the other generations because Gen Z can treat jobs like dating apps, right? If they don't like the way it feels, if they don't like the vibe, they swipe left and they move along. I get that from some perspectives, but I can see why they burn a lot of bridges with their coworkers of other generations.
That's good.
And I've seen people do it. I've seen people come in, they have a hard, they get yelled at by a customer, they have a hard shift, something goes wrong, and they just walk out. Like, they don't resign, they just walk out. And it is hard as an employer to staff appropriately when somebody can walk in, have a mental breakdown, and suddenly you're shorthanded because they can't deal or they can't even.
Yeah, I know. This is a little bit of an older millennial talking here, but the fact that like people go, I need to take a mental health day. Mm-hmm. Really? That's a thing? What?
It's a thing.
Oh, okay, cool. But I guess, for us, we were just like, I don't feel like working today. I'm going to call in sick.
Right.
I guess
That's probably
we were just maybe less honest about what we were doing, or
less
more
honest
so
about
like
it.
a mental health day.
Yeah. But as I think about the conflicts between Gen Z employees and other generations, there's certainly some respect for history, paying your dues. Like, as you think about Gen X and boomers, many of these people were in roles for years before they got promotion opportunities. A lot of Gen Z employees, they expect annual promotions. And that's just not really how the world works. But employers are having to figure out what to do with that, because they do want to challenge the way things have always been done. They want to challenge authority. And sometimes they have good ideas, but sometimes they don't know what they're talking about. You've got to find a way to discern, is this an opportunity to improve things, or are they just running their mouth because they don't know what they're talking about?
Yeah, and I think one of the issues, or where Gen Z can either find themselves in a lot of trouble or find themselves, leveraging the situation, is that instant gratification, want to move quick, technology and you know how to do things. But too often I see Gen Zers come up with a 1X mindset. They can do this task and they can automate it, but they've looked at it in this very narrow view. And as soon as you throw in a variable or reality, like we're humans, you're interacting with other humans, and things break, then that process is really not scalable. And then what do? They make another 1X and another 1X and another 1X. And then what you end up with is this overinflated SOP that's very complicated, that takes 5 times more energy. But because you're just moving so fast, you don't realize you're not actually accomplishing anything. You're just creating a lot of activity. And so I would say, from a Gen Zer, if you can find that, but then you can figure out how to 10X that with a 10X mindset, like how can I future proof this? How can I layer it? How can I look a little bit above and figure out how to actually 10X the process? You'll go a lot farther. But again, that's where I see most of the headache, especially on a process side, is when I get a 1X, like we're trying to 10X a process and I get 1X ideas. And then it's, well, why didn't we just do the 1X idea? It would already be done. If I just did that 10 times, that's 10X, right? No, it's not. It's
doesn't
actually
doesn't work that way. I've also seen Gen Z employees want transparency, and that does not tend to play well with larger, kind of more bureaucratic institutions.
I like that one. And I think there's always been a level of scoreboard or scorecard, if you will. But I think as the paradigm has shifted, we've changed where the scoreboard needs to be. The boomers would work for money. The money was, how much money did I make? How much money did I take home? That was my scorecard, right?
Right.
My sales quota, my check, that was my scorecard. Since millennials and Gen Z, and you have to tell me if X fits in this in a little bit as well, is there's a level of just, I need to make a living. I definitely want more, but I want to make a living, but I want to know what I'm doing is meaningful. And so I want more transparency within the business to know that the business is making the right decisions and that my efforts aren't in vain. And by not sharing that scoreboard, you're actually hindering their ability to work harder or work smarter, if you will. And that creates actually a lot of dissonance within the organization. And what, the older generations here is, I want you to show all the financial data because I don't trust you with it.
Right.
And it's like, there's a level of that too, because if you're being shady, then you deserve it. But as we've evolved our level of thinking, the scorecard has to evolve above what's my immediate paycheck.
Yeah.
And so
I almost wonder if it's a question of vision for each generation. Like, I wonder if the boomers' vision of work was, this is, it's a financial game that I'm trying to win, right? And whatever I've got to do to win the financial game is what I got to do. I think Gen X reacted against that and said, the game's rigged, the game's stupid. I'm going to go be an independent contractor so that I can have a little bit more control over my own destiny. I think Gen Z wants to work, but they want purpose. Like, they expect meaning and purpose from their work. And they want to know how their work is making the world a better place. And if you don't have an answer to that, they're going to go someplace that does. And I think some of that is true for Gen Z as well, but I think that they have much less tolerance for bureaucracy, for hierarchy, and for just kind of BS. Like I don't think they are willing to tolerate much, and yet they bring a lot of technology and innovative ideas. I think that that each generation has a different vision of what a good working relationship looks like.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is this the good old paradigm of, everybody's got a spot on the wheel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each generation is probably, you probably got some that are on one end of the younger side of the generation on one part of the wheel, and slightly further down for the older generation or older people in that category.
Mm-hmm.
But they're within the pillar, right? And then is it the good old, like, the journey people saying we need to go left, and the results people saying we need to go right, but at the end of the day they're talking about the same thing?
Here's my read on it. I think boomers are results driven. I'm going to go Gen Xers are more journey driven, right? They're in it. They're grinders. They understood the analog and the digital side. They're willing to just roll up their sleeves and figure it out. I think the millennials are vision. They want to make the world a better place, but Gen Zs are culture. They care about how it feels.
That's interesting.
Right? Because if I have a bad day, I'm out. Like, I quit if I have a bad day. If somebody's mean to me, I'm resigning.
See, I almost wonder if it's, do you put the boomers are at the cross of results and culture? I actually think you put the Xers on culture and journey. You put the millennials on vision and journey, and you put Z on vision and results.
So going backwards through the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Because the reason why I put Z at the vision results side is they want that instant gratification. They think they've got the ideas, and there's a level of culture connection to it, but they're disconnected from the bigger culture of everything else because they're so vision results focused.
Right.
The reason why I put Gen Z at culture and journey is there's the lack of vision component of journey, but there's the social emotional connection to journey. Mm-hmm. And then that's where, boomers are definitely about the relationship and the results, but there's no vision there.
Yeah, but there's no vision.
There's no vision. And then, millennials are all about the vision and journey, which puts them 180 degrees from the boomers. Right.
They're going to be sitting in each other's blind spots. I don't think that any one of these generations is right, and any one of them is entirely wrong.
Not at all.
I think they all have valid perspectives and blind spots. So how do you manage a workforce with with generational diversity?
Ooh, that's a good question.
If you had all four generations, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs all working for you at the same time, how would you communicate with them? How would you manage a team like that?
I don't think I'd answer this the same as if it was like an American, a Colombian, a Bulgarian, and a Japanese.
Okay.
I think it goes down to just understanding the uniques of each generation or each, category of people, and figuring out how you can leverage each other for what you're trying to achieve. I mean, there are relationship skills that the boomers have that the younger generations don't. If you can leverage those, you will make better connections. There are processes that the millennials can make that the Gen Xers can enforce that will drive the business forward in a more meaningful way. And there are great ideas that Gen Z has because they can see it in a better way. And if you could figure out how they're trying to leverage it and take their idea and apply it with everything else with the experience, you'll probably move faster. So at the end of the day, it's everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. Just leverage each other's strengths and don't focus on each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it requires a workforce that is self-aware, that they understand their strengths and weaknesses. They're humble enough to admit they don't have all the right answers, and curious enough to be willing to reevaluate things that they just assume, right? Whether it's assuming that this is the way we've always done things, or assuming that because it's been done for 30 years, I've got a better way. that humility and curiosity, I think, pairs really well to create a healthy cultural dynamic, even if you've got multiple generations working together.
So I'm going to use an example real quick from sales. A boomer is going to say, pick up the phone book and just start calling down the line.
Dialing for dollars.
Right? Which the phone book doesn't exist anymore. People don't answer their phones. It's changed. But if you get in a room with that person and say, okay, you call that person, what are you going to say to get them to stay on the phone? Just take that to today's current technology. That's Apollo IO with an email. So you don't need to follow the old process of pick up the phone and start dialing, but it's why would you say what you're going to say to get them on the phone and transpose that into a modern day standard? Mm-hmm. So that's where you can leverage the two components for a better result.
I like that. Which generation's work ethic do you agree with? Drop your thoughts in the comments. In the next episode, we will be talking about how each generation communicates, why they don't communicate well, why nobody's happy about it, and how that makes work suck for all generations, and what we can do to maybe make work not suck a little less. Thanks for listening.
Make Work Not Suck. Our podcast that talks about exactly that. Our process, vision, journey, culture, and results. We present real-world business solutions that make the difference. Our goal is to make work not suck. Hosted by Ryan Hodges, co-host Daniel Steer. Join us each episode and make work not suck.